Hello, you are safe now. Your day is behind you. Your body can rest. Your mind can drift. This story will be calm, steady, and soft. Tonight we travel to the Middle Ages, a time of stone streets, wooden homes, and flickering candlelight. We will not look at battles or kings. Instead, we will look at water, washing, and bathing. Bathing in the Middle Ages was very different from today. People did not always have soap. They did not always have clean water. They often bathed in ways that seemed strange and sometimes unpleasant. Yet, told slowly, the facts become gentle. Gross details turn into quiet curiosities, and while you listen, your mind can wander. Like water, these images will flow past, calm and unhurried. Take a deep breath now. Let the air move in and out. You do not need to think or hold on. The story will carry you, softly, into rest. Section 1. Public bathhouses in the Middle Ages. One of the most curious places in a town or city was the public bathhouse. From the outside, it looked plain, just another wooden or stone building, often with smoke curling gently from a chimney. But when you stepped inside, the air was thick, warm, and damp. Steam clung to the walls, and voices echoed through the mist. It was not quiet or private, but crowded and alive. Bathhouses had large tubs, sometimes made of wood, sometimes of stone. The tubs were filled by hand, with hot water carried from cauldrons simmering over fires. Buckets clattered as servants poured steaming water in, mixing it with cooler water from the well. It was hard work to prepare, and yet the water was not changed for each new visitor. Many people would share the same bath before the water was emptied. In the early hours of the day, the bath water was clearer. The first to arrive stepped into warm, inviting tubs. But as more people entered, the water grew cloudy. Skin oils floated on the surface. Hair drifted in the steam. Crumbs from food slipped into the bath. By evening, the tubs were often murky, with a faint, sour smell. Herbs were sometimes sprinkled in to hide the odor. Mint, lavender, and rosemary were popular choices, their scents filling the air. Sometimes rose petals floated like tiny boats, giving the impression of freshness. But the herbs only masked the smell. They did not clean the water. Bathing was as much about comfort and ritual as true hygiene. The bathhouse was not only a place to wash, it was also a place to eat, drink, and talk. Servants might bring trays of cheese, bread, and roasted meat. Imagine greasy fingers breaking bread, crumbs falling into the steaming tubs. Beer and wine were poured freely, and laughter echoed off the wet walls. The floor was slick with water, muddy with footprints. Benches lined the walls, damp from dripping bodies. Wood absorbed the smell of steam and sweat, darkening over time. Candles flickered in the moist air, their flames bending and hissing. Every surface felt heavy with dampness. Men and women sometimes bathed together. Nobles might sit side by side with common folk. In the steam, rank and wealth blurred. Everyone looked similar, their skin shining with heat. The bathhouse mixed classes in ways that few other places did. It was social, intimate, and often a little unruly. The noise was constant. The splash of water, the scrape of cups, the rise and fall of voices. Some corners were filled with gossip and laughter. Other corners were quieter, with whispered business deals or secret meetings. For some, the bathhouse was more about company than cleaning. The air was filled with smells, too. The sharp scent of herbs, the sweet note of wine, the sourness of sweat, the dampness of wet wood. All of it blended together into a heavy perfume that clung to the skin. When bathers left, they carried the smell of the bathhouse with them, mixed with the steam still rising from their hair. Children sometimes came with their parents. They splashed noisily, delighting in the warm water. They played with wooden toys or simple clay figures, floating them across the bath like boats. For them, the grossness of the water did not matter. It was fun, it was warm, and it was rare. But there was danger too. Doctors later warned that sickness could spread in these shared baths. Skin infections, fevers, even outbreaks of plague were sometimes blamed on bathhouses. The close contact, the reused water, and the damp air made disease easy to pass. Slowly, suspicion grew around public bathing. Still, for centuries, the bathhouse thrived. In winter, it was a place of warmth when homes were cold. In summer, it was a place of relaxation after long work. It was entertainment. It was comfort. It was routine. Even when people knew it was dirty, they still returned. At night, when the doors closed, the building exhaled steam into the street. Inside, the floors remained wet, the tubs still half full of cloudy water. The smell lingered in the dark halls. The bathhouse slept, only to be filled again the next day. Imagine standing just inside the doorway, watching quietly. The air fogs your vision, candles flicker, voices echo. You do not join, you only observe. The grossness is softened by distance, turned into curiosity. The past unfolds slowly, gently, as you drift with it. Section 2. Bathing in rivers and ponds. Not everyone in the Middle Ages lived near a bathhouse. In villages or in the countryside, people often bathed outdoors. The rivers, ponds, and small streams became their washing places. It was simple, it was free, and it required no tubs or firewood. The rivers looked clean from a distance. The surface reflected the sky, clear and bright, but the water carried much more than fresh rain. It was filled with mud, with weeds, with the waste of animals, and sometimes human waste as well. Villagers had no choice but to use what was available. Bathing in rivers was often done in groups. Men gathered together, splashing and scrubbing. Women bathed in their own places, sometimes further downstream. Children played in the shallow water, laughing and sliding on the muddy banks. It was a lively scene, but never truly private. The ground around ponds was slippery and wet. Mud clung to the feet, squelching with each step. When people entered the pond, their movement stirred the bottom. Clouds of brown dirt rose, surrounding their bodies. Instead of feeling clean, many left covered in a thin layer of silt. Animals used the same water. Cows waded in to drink. Horses crossed the shallows, hooves stirring the mud. Dogs splashed beside their owners, shaking water over everyone nearby. Sometimes pigs rooted along the banks, leaving waste in the same water used for bathing. Washing clothes was often done at the same rivers and ponds. Women beat wet cloth against stones, scrubbing with ashes or sand. Soaps made from animal fat and lye were sometimes used, leaving a sharp, biting smell. The dirty rinse water mixed back into the river, floating beside those who bathed. One person's laundry became another person's bathwater. During hot summers, rivers were popular. The cool water gave relief after hours in the fields. but the heat also brought algae. Green slime floated on the surface, clinging to arms and legs. The water smelled of decay, warm and stagnant, yet still it was used. In colder seasons, bathing outdoors was painful. The water was icy, numbing the skin quickly. Bathers gasped, shivered, and hurried through the task. Their teeth chattered as they rubbed at their bodies. Often, they left half clean, unable to bear the chill for long. Privacy was rare. Bathing often meant being seen by neighbors or strangers passing by. The sight was ordinary and accepted, though some tried to cover themselves with simple linen cloths. Others did not bother, their focus only on the task. For medieval people, modesty was different than it is today. The smells of rivers and ponds were not pleasant. Fish swam close, leaving a faint odor of scales and slime. Rotting plants drifted at the edges. In some places, waste from towns flowed directly into the water. What seemed fresh was often far from clean. Yet there was comfort in these simple baths. The cool water soothed sore muscles. The ripples felt gentle against the skin. The sound of running water was calming, even if it was dirty. It gave people a brief sense of renewal, even without true cleanliness. Children made it into play. They chased each other into the shallows. They splashed loudly, uncaring about filth. They caught frogs or floated sticks like boats. For them, bathing in rivers was joy, not chore. Villagers often bathed less frequently than townsfolk with bathhouses. For some, a plunge into the river once a week was enough. For others, only a few times each season. Work in the fields, mud on the boots, smoke from fires. These things clung to the body until the next chance for water. Cleanliness was not measured as it is now. There were also dangers in river bathing. Strong currents could sweep children away. Slippery stones could cause falls and bruises. Leeches clung to bare skin, sucking blood silently. After bathing, some left the water with tiny wounds, itching and sore. Despite this, the rivers remained essential. They were used for bathing, washing, drinking, and watering animals. All of life circled around the same body of water. It was shared by humans, beasts, and nature, without separation. The idea of purity was different. It meant simply rinsing, not sterilizing. Imagine standing on the bank of a medieval river. The air smells of wet earth, smoke from a distant fire, and the faint odor of livestock. Children laugh, splashing in the shallows. A woman wrings out cloth, beating it against a stone. A man lowers himself into the muddy water, sighing at the coolness. The river flows on, steady and indifferent. It carries dirt, waste, and weeds. But to those who lived then, it was enough. It was life, and it was water, and it was all they had. In the calm of night, we see it from afar, gross, yet strangely peaceful. Section 3. Soap, scrubbing, and strange cleaning methods. When we think of soap today, we imagine smooth bars that smell of flowers, or bottles of liquid that foam into fragrant bubbles. In the Middle Ages, however, soap was something very different. It was harsh, heavy, and far from pleasant. Yet it was one of the few tools people had for scrubbing themselves clean. The earliest soaps were made from animal fat. After a pig was slaughtered, the fat was boiled down. Lye, created from wood ash soaked in water, was mixed in. The result was a thick, grayish paste. It was caustic, biting against the skin. Instead of leaving a fresh scent, it carried the smell of smoke and fat. Washing with it was closer to being burned than refreshed. For many, this harsh soap was used sparingly. It could dry and crack the skin, leaving hands raw and red. Yet without it, greasy dirt from work and cooking was difficult to remove. Farmers came home with soil ground into their hands. Blacksmiths had soot and ash clinging to their faces. Women smelled of smoke from open fires. Soap was the only way to scrub some of this away. Not everyone could afford true soap. In poorer villages, simpler methods were used. Sand was rubbed onto the skin like a natural exfoliant. It scratched away grime but left the body raw. Clay was also used. Smooth when wet, it absorbed oil and sweat. People would smear it on, wait, and then rinse in rivers or basins. Even mud itself was sometimes used. The idea was simple: dirt removes dirt. There were also strange herbal washes. Leaves of sage, rosemary, and thyme were boiled, and the water was poured over the body. The herbs gave a faint smell, covering the odor of sweat for a short time. Nettles, despite their sting, were also used in decoctions for scrubbing. Vinegar diluted with water served as a primitive cleanser, its sour smell masking worse scents. One unusual method was the use of urine. Stored in clay jugs until it fermented, it turned into ammonia-rich liquid. Tanners used it for treating hides, but some households also used it for washing. Urine cut through grease better than weak soap. Clothes were soaked in it, then beaten and rinsed. Skin was sometimes wiped with it as well. The smell was sharp, burning the nose, but for medieval people, it was practical. In larger towns, bathhouses sometimes provided soap for their visitors. These were small lumps, often rough in texture. A bather would lather as best they could, then rinse in a communal tub. After dozens of people did the same, the water grew cloudy, floating with oil, sweat, and flakes of skin. Still, compared to washing at home, it was a luxury. Scrubbing tools were simple. A rough cloth, a handful of straw, or even bunches of twigs were used to scrape at the skin. Sometimes a piece of pumice stone was rubbed against calloused feet or dirty hands. These methods removed grime, but also layers of skin. Many left the bather sore and red after cleaning. Hair was another challenge. Soap was too harsh for regular use on the scalp. It left hair brittle and dull. Instead, people often rinsed their hair with water, mixed with herbs. Chamomile, lavender, or nettles were boiled and poured over the head. This gave a faint scent and made the hair easier to comb. Combs themselves were wooden, sometimes carved with wide teeth to pull through tangles. Lice, however, were a constant problem. No amount of washing truly removed them. People would sit for hours, picking through each other's hair, crushing the tiny insects between their nails. Beards and shaving had their own methods. Wealthy men might use razors of sharpened steel, but many villagers simply trimmed with knives. Soap lather was rare, so shaving was often dry, tearing at the skin. Cuts were common, and infection followed. Some men grew beards, not from fashion, but from avoiding this painful task. Women used their own tricks. Some washed their faces with milk, believing it softened the skin. Others rubbed bread, soaked in wine as a gentle scrub. Egg whites were smeared on cheeks as a kind of mask. These methods did little against the real dirt of medieval life. But they gave the illusion of care. Religious beliefs also shaped cleaning. Monks and nuns washed their hands and faces regularly before prayers. Some monasteries even made their own soap, selling it to travelers. Pilgrims sometimes carried small packets of herbs to rinse themselves on long journeys. Cleanliness was linked with holiness, though not always with health. For the majority, scrubbing was done only when truly necessary. After a day in the fields, wiping off the worst with a rag was often enough. Full body cleaning was rare. Smells lingered, clothes absorbed them, and the air itself carried the scent of unwashed bodies. Medieval towns were alive with these odors, heavy and unavoidable. Imagine standing in a bathhouse. You hold a lump of coarse soap, gritty in your hand. You scrub and your skin stings. The water around you grows cloudy, tinged with sweat and fat. Across the room, another bather rubs with sand, scratching red marks into his arms. Someone pours a bucket of herbal water over their head, the steam carrying a faint smell of rosemary. All around, people try, in their own ways, to be clean, though, by our standards, they were never truly fresh. In the countryside, the scene is different. A woman kneels by the river, beating cloth against a stone. She scrubs with ashes, gray water soaking into the soil. A man nearby rubs his arms with sand, grimacing at the scrape. Children laugh as they smear mud on each other, believing they are washing. The smell of animals drifts in the breeze, mixing with the sour scent of vinegar poured over skin. To us, these methods seem strange, even revolting, but to them it was ordinary. Soap, harsh and smoky, was precious. Herbs, vinegar, clay, and urine were simply tools of survival. Cleanliness was not about being fragrant or spotless. It was about scraping away the worst of the dirt, about feeling a little lighter, a little fresher, if only for a short time. And so, medieval scrubbing was both gross and human. It was rough, imperfect, and often smelly. Yet within it, we glimpse a truth. People have always wanted to feel clean, even when their methods left them far from it. Section 4. Bathhouses, Luxury, Sin, and Scandal. Medieval bathhouses were strange places, full of both comfort and curiosity. They were meant for washing, yet they often became spaces for something more. Steam rose from large wooden tubs, carrying the smell of herbs, sweat, and oil. Inside, people moved slowly, talking, splashing, and sometimes gossiping quietly. For the wealthy, bathhouses were a kind of luxury. Rich townsfolk and nobles could pay for private rooms. These rooms had larger tubs, sometimes with benches carved from smooth wood. Water was heated over fires and poured carefully, so it was warmer than what most villagers could afford. Even so, the water could still be murky, as others had used it before. Wealthy bathers sometimes added herbs, flowers, or scented oils. Rosewater or lavender softened the harshness of the air. Finer soaps, made from imported ingredients, left the skin slightly smoother. But even these luxuries did not make the bath completely clean. It was still shared in part with the smell of the room, the wood, and the damp air. For many, the bathhouse was a social place. Neighbors met to talk about markets, harvests, and news. Tradesmen discussed business deals in the steam-filled rooms. Children occasionally played, running and splashing under careful watch. Voices echoed, laughter mingled with the splash of water, and the atmosphere was busy, yet oddly soothing. Yet the bathhouse was also a place of scandal. Men and women sometimes bathed together, ignoring social rules. Romantic encounters, flirting, and secret meetings were whispered about afterward. Officials complained that bathhouses encouraged sinful behavior. Despite this, people continued to visit, drawn by warmth, water, and social opportunity. The layout of bathhouses reflected these roles. Large communal tubs were in the center, surrounded by benches and small rooms. Some rooms were reserved for private bathing, while others served as changing areas. Floors were always wet, sometimes slippery with soap, mud, or spilled drink. The smell of wet wood, herbs, and human skin filled every corner. Even in luxurious bathhouses, hygiene was limited. Water might be warm, but it was rarely changed frequently. Oil, sweat, and dirt from dozens of bathers lingered. The more people came, the murkier it became. Even a noble, paying for comfort, could not escape it entirely. In some cities, bathhouses served meals as well. Servants carried bread, cheese, and meat into the rooms. Drink flowed freely, usually wine or beer. Crumbs fell into tubs, grease left a faint film on the water. The bathhouse became a mix of dining hall, tavern, and washing place. Music sometimes accompanied the scene. A lute or harp played softly in corners, or street musicians performed nearby. The sound drifted through open windows and doors, mixing with splashes and conversation. It gave the bathhouse a lively yet strangely gentle atmosphere. Some bathhouses even had small gardens or courtyards. Sunlight filtered through wooden lattice, warming stone floors. Birds might perch nearby, adding soft song to the hum of human activity. These touches created calmness amid the chaotic mix of water, scent, and bodies. Children's presence was common too. They might float small toys in the water or chase each other along the benches. For them, it was play, not hygiene. The splashes and laughter softened the otherwise strange, sometimes gross, scene. Medical beliefs influenced bathhouse use. Doctors warned that water could carry disease, but people often ignored them. Boils, rashes, and infections were common after visits, especially when water was reused. Some bathhouses became associated with illness. Though their warmth still attracted visitors, clothing was often removed entirely in bathhouses. Towels were rare. Bathers would step into the tubs bare, their skin pressed together in the crowded spaces. Sweat, dirt, and oil blended with the water. The steam softened the atmosphere, but the reality was still far from the clean baths we know today. Despite these challenges, bathhouses remained a vital part of medieval life. They provided warmth in winter and relief in summer. They offered social contact and a brief pause from work. Even in murky water and strong smells, people returned day after day. Imagine standing quietly in a bathhouse. The air is thick with steam and the scent of herbs. Voices rise and fall in conversation. Children splash in the distance. The wood beneath your feet is damp and cool. All around, life continues in this mixture of grossness, warmth, and gentle rhythm. Bathhouses were never perfect. They carried smells, disease, and misbehavior, yet they were comforting, familiar, and strangely human. They show us how people in the Middle Ages lived, laughed, and cared for themselves as best they could. Even in the grossest water, there was warmth, life, and rhythm. Section 5. Bathing the body. Routines, techniques, and odd habits. Medieval bathing routines were unlike anything we imagine today. People did not wash every day, and the methods were unusual to modern eyes. Bathing could be an event, a careful sequence, or a hurried splash in a river. For some, it was social. For others, it was private and rare. Each region, each village, each household had its own approach. Soap, as we have seen, was coarse and harsh. To clean, people would first scrub with rough cloths or twigs. Straw or plant fibers were sometimes twisted into brushes to remove stubborn dirt. In wealthier homes, pumice stones were used for the hands and feet, scraping layers of grime away. The action was slow and deliberate, almost ritualistic, yet often painful. Many people began with the face. They might rinse with water infused with herbs, or smear clay over their cheeks. Some used bread soaked in wine, rubbing it gently against the skin. Milk, if available, was poured on the face or hair as a softening treatment. After the wash, the residue might be wiped away with a damp cloth. The hair presented other challenges. Hair was often long, coarse, and tangled. Combs were wooden, carved with wide teeth. People would work through knots slowly, sometimes while seated in a tub. Lice were a constant problem. Even thorough washing could not remove them completely. Families spent long hours picking, cleaning, and untangling hair, turning hygiene into a slow, communal activity. Arms and legs were next. Water alone rarely sufficed. Sand or ashes were rubbed against the skin, sometimes mixed with soap. The grit scratched away sweat, grease, and soil. Bodies often came away red and raw, the skin stinging from the scrubbing. Yet this rough routine was the best they had, and it was believed to make them healthier. Clothing also affected bathing habits. Underclothes and tunics were often worn for days or weeks. They absorbed sweat, smoke, and odors from cooking fires. When possible, people washed the garments separately in rivers, ponds, or tubs. Clothes were beaten against stones, rinsed, and left to dry in the sun. Even clean clothes, however, carried faint reminders of the body's natural smells. Feet were especially dirty. People walked on dirt roads, in stables, and across fields. Bathing the feet meant soaking them in warm water, sometimes mixed with herbs or ash. Toenails were scrubbed, calluses scraped with pumice, and sometimes small cuts were treated with vinegar. Even so, the smell lingered, earthy and sharp, a reminder of daily life in the streets. Strange techniques were also common. Some used urine, its ammonia cutting through grease and oils. Others applied sour milk or vinegar to remove odor from armpits or feet. Herbal infusions were poured over the body, leaves floating in the water. Nettles, though stinging, were believed to improve circulation and clean the skin. These methods were not gentle, yet they reflected the knowledge and resources of the time. Bathing order could be structured. Some started with the upper body, then washed legs and feet. Children were sometimes washed first, their playfulness leaving them dirtier. Pets were occasionally cleaned alongside humans, particularly small dogs. The household bath was a mixture of work, play, and ritual. Some people believed in ritual washing for health and spirit. They would pour water over themselves 3 times, symbolizing purification. They would recite prayers, ask for protection from disease, and linger in the warmth. Water, even dirty or cloudy, was associated with renewal, both of body and soul. Even in gross conditions, this gave a sense of control and care. Hygiene was influenced by weather. In winter, water was heated in cauldrons or over fireplaces. People scrubbed quickly, often in small tubs to conserve heat. Hands, face, and feet were the focus, with full immersion less common. In summer, rivers and ponds allowed longer, more playful bathing. Sun warmed the skin, the water cooled it, and the experience became almost enjoyable, despite dirt and odors. In towns, bathhouses offered their own routines. Some followed strict schedules. Men and women bathed at separate times, or families reserved specific hours. Others allowed anyone to enter, making scrubbing a communal, noisy affair. Vast wooden tubs were shared by dozens, oils and dirt mixing in the water. Herbs floated, children splashed, and adults performed rituals of scrubbing and washing. The routines were also shaped by belief in humors and medicine. Doctors advised that bathing could affect balance in the body. Too much washing could cool or weaken it. Too little could allow illness to grow. Soap, herbs, and water were tools in this medical practice. People smubbed carefully, believing that proper cleaning prevented disease, though they did not know germs as we do today. Even small details mattered. Bathers might rinse their hands before touching food. They might wash their faces before prayers or ceremonies. Children learned the routines slowly, guided by parents and neighbors. Every scrub, every rinse, became part of daily rhythm, blending necessity, comfort, and superstition. Imagine the scene. A woman kneels beside a wooden tub. She dips a rough cloth in hot, gray water, scrubbing her arms. A child splashes nearby, laughter ringing above the smell of herbs and sweat. A man rubs sand into his feet, grimacing at the scratch. The sun filters through a window, glinting off damp hair, while steam rises in slow, curling clouds. The air is heavy, warm, and faintly unpleasant, but also calm, steady, and strangely gentle. Through all these routines, soap, scrubbing, herbs, vinegar, even urine, people navigated life in a world without modern hygiene. They made do, using what they had to keep bodies as clean as possible. The grossness of medieval bathing was unavoidable, yet within it, there was order, ritual, and a quiet rhythm that carried through daily life. Even today, we can imagine it softly, letting the story drift around us as we relax. Section 6: Children, Animals, and Accidental Messes in Medieval Bathing. In medieval towns and villages, the bath was rarely a quiet, solitary event. Children were almost always present, laughing, playing, and splashing. They ran along slippery floors, sometimes falling into tubs, sending small waves across the water. Their hair and clothes became soaked, carrying bits of dirt and straw from the streets. Parents often watched, but allowed the mess. Understanding it was part of daily life, children did not mind the murky water. They rubbed mud across their arms, played with floating sticks, and chased frogs in shallow rivers. Some used small wooden or clay toys as boats, floating them across the water. Others poured cups of water over each other, giggling as it splashed into the tubs or puddles. To them, the grossness was irrelevant. It was play, warmth, and fun. Animals were another source of mess. Dogs often followed bathers into rivers or bathhouse courtyards. They shook wet fur, splattering water onto the humans nearby. Cats sometimes watched quietly, brushing against damp legs, leaving fur behind. Livestock, cows, pigs, and goats, frequently drank from the same water used for washing. Their hooves stirred mud, their droppings sometimes drifting into ponds or tubs. Bathing outdoors, near streams or ponds, amplified the mess. The muddy banks clung to legs and feet. Leaves, twigs, and algae floated around in the water. Small fish darted through shallow areas, brushing against skin. Even the wind could carry dust and pollen into the water, settling on bathers as a fine, invisible layer. Families often shared the water. Parents bathed first, then children, then sometimes older animals. The same bucket of water could wash multiple bodies, with dirt transferring from one to another. Soap or herbs might be added to disguise odors, but it could not remove all grime. What seemed like cleaning became a slow, messy routine, teaching patience as much as hygiene. Within bathhouses, the mess was more contained, but just as noticeable. Children splashed in corners, slipping on wet floors. Parents scolded gently, but allowed the fun to continue. Crumbs from food fell into the tubs, carried by little hands or dropped from trays. Grease from roasted meats floated alongside soap residue, creating a faintly oily film. Animals were sometimes permitted inside bathhouses. Small dogs or cats followed their owners, stepping into water or curling up on damp benches. The floors, already wet and slippery, became more treacherous. Occasionally, birds perched on open beams, dropping feathers or excrement into the room below. The bathhouse was alive with movement, sounds and smells, a mixture of humanity and nature. The smells were strong, yet oddly comforting in their own rhythm. Wet straw, mud, soap, herbs, and animal scent mingled together. It was earthy, dense, and persistent, clinging to skin and hair. Even after drying and dressing, bathers carried faint traces of this mixture with them. In this way, the mess was not just accidental, it became part of daily life. Children often learned cleaning habits through play. Parents demonstrated scrubbing techniques while children mimicked, using hands or small cloths. They experimented with herbs, rubbing leaves against skin. They poured water from buckets, learning how to rinse properly. Even in messy water, lessons were absorbed quietly, forming the routines of future hygiene. The presence of animals created unique challenges. Dogs shook themselves, sending droplets in all directions. Cats brushed against bathers, leaving fur behind. Horses and pigs waded through rivers, stirring mud and debris. People adapted, sometimes building small pens or choosing specific times for human-only bathing. Yet nature was never fully excluded from water, and the mess remained constant. Unexpected events added to the chaos. A sudden gust of wind might blow leaves, dust, or small twigs into tubs. Rain could swell rivers, bringing extra debris downstream. Children might slip, falling into puddles or overturning buckets of water. Each small accident added to the gentle disorder of medieval bathing. Despite the mess, there was comfort and rhythm in the process. The warm water soothed tired muscles. Steam rising from bathhouses or river surfaces created a sense of calm. Children's laughter, though noisy, filled the spaces with life. Animals' movements, though unpredictable, connected people to the natural world. Even gross elements, mud, algae, stray hair, bits of food, became part of the sensory experience. The combination of smells, textures, and sounds created an environment both chaotic and strangely relaxing. It was a world where humans, animals, and water interacted continuously. Messiness was unavoidable, yet it was ordinary, accepted, and woven into daily life. People learned patience and care through these interactions. Bathing became a small ritual, teaching awareness of surroundings and respect for others' space. Children observed, imitated, and gradually absorbed the knowledge of cleaning and washing. Animals reinforced attentiveness, as their unpredictability required careful handling. The mess, though unpleasant by modern standards, was part of education, play, and life. Imagine standing quietly by a muddy riverbank. Children are laughing, splashing, and chasing frogs. A dog shakes off water, sending droplets into the air. A cow wades slowly into the shallow area, stirring up brown clouds. A woman scrubs her hands with sand, water dripping onto her skirts. The air smells earthy, wet, herbal, and alive with the presence of humans and animals alike. The combination of chaos and routine created a unique calm. People moved slowly, deliberately, despite noise, splashes, and mess. The body was washed, even if imperfectly. The water carried away the heat, the dust, and the day's toil. Life, gross and messy, continued in gentle rhythm. Bathing with children, animals, and accidental messes was never neat, but it was deeply human and deeply ordinary. It reminds us that hygiene, comfort, and daily life were intertwined with play, learning, and nature. Even in the mess, there was calm, warmth, and a soft rhythm. It was the strange, messy heartbeat of medieval life. Section 7. Medieval Baths and Illness, Dirt, Disease, and Beliefs. In the Middle Ages, people often worried about sickness connected to bathing. Doctors, priests, and elders all gave advice on when and how to wash. Water was believed to carry both life and danger. Too much washing could chill the body, too little could allow disease to grow. These beliefs shaped bathing habits, creating rituals and restrictions that seem unusual today. Illness was a constant concern. Plague, fevers, and skin infections were feared, though people did not understand germs. Bathhouses were especially suspicious in the eyes of authorities. Water shared by many, damp wooden floors, and steam-filled rooms were thought to spread illness. Yet despite warnings, people continued to bathe, seeking relief from heat, grime, and discomfort. Some believed that dirt itself could protect the body. Layered skin oils and soil were thought to prevent the bad airs from entering the body. In this view, a little grime was safer than overly clean skin. Bathing too often might expose a person to dangerous vapors or cold drafts. These ideas guided when and how families bathed, sometimes limiting washing to weekly or seasonal events. Doctors also advised on timing. It was considered safer to bathe during certain times of day. Morning baths were preferred for the body's warmth, while evening baths were sometimes discouraged. Cold water or sudden exposure could weaken the humors. Blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, believed to govern health. People followed these rules cautiously, balancing hygiene with fear of illness. Bathhouse hygiene varied greatly. Some were relatively clean, with water heated and occasionally changed. Others were crowded and poorly maintained, the tubs shared by dozens of bathers. Water turned cloudy with sweat, skin flakes, and oils. People scrubbed with soap, sand, or herbal pastes, trying to remove dirt while avoiding sickness. The effort often left skin irritated, yet it was considered necessary. Rivers and ponds presented different risks. Outdoor bathing could expose the body to cold, mud, and stagnant water. Algae, decaying plants, and animal waste sometimes carried unseen dangers. Even children, splashing in shallow streams, might pick up parasites. Yet these were accepted as normal hazards of daily life, rarely preventing people from bathing entirely. Herbs played an important role in disease prevention. Lavender, rosemary, chamomile, and sage were used to purify water or rubbed on the skin. Some people believed the strong scents could ward off miasmas, the invisible bad airs thought to cause illness. In bathhouses, pots of herbs simmered over fires, filling the room with fragrant steam. The smell masked odors and created a soothing environment. Even if it did not truly cleanse, medical and religious advice often overlapped. Monks and nuns washed carefully before prayers, believing cleanliness supported spiritual purity. Pilgrims carried herbal sachets or vinegar-soaked cloths for washing during travel. Ritual washing was both practical and symbolic, a blend of body care and devotion. Even in gross or crowded conditions, this created a sense of calm and order. Some towns imposed rules to prevent illness. Signs advised which days certain groups could bathe. Men and women might be separated, reducing exposure to each other. Baths were sometimes prohibited during outbreaks, and authorities warned of damp floors or shared tubs. Despite this, the public desire for bathing remained strong. Children and animals could complicate hygiene further. Dogs and cats brought fur, mud, and small parasites. Children splashed, played, and carried dirt into tubs. Even careful scrubbing could not remove all traces of these interactions. The combination of people, animals, and reused water created constant risk of minor skin infections. Interestingly, some practices had protective effects, even unknowingly. Scrubbing with sand or herbs removed dirt and some parasites. Rinsing in moving water occasionally carried away small waste particles. Steam in bathhouses helped warm the body and might reduce chills, supporting comfort. Despite the grossness, these small habits contributed to survival in a world without modern medicine. Baths were sometimes avoided for fear of disease. During epidemics, people might stay away entirely. Families washed in small basins at home, using herbs or ash for cleaning. This limited exposure but did not prevent routine messes and odors. The struggle between hygiene and fear of sickness shaped everyday life profoundly. The presence of illness also influenced clothing and towels. People sometimes changed garments less frequently to conserve warmth and avoid cold drafts. Towels and rags were often shared among family members. Even the act of drying could introduce minor infection, though it was rarely considered dangerous. Bathing remained essential, but always accompanied by caution and ritual. Imagine a small bathhouse at midday. Steam rises from murky water, carrying the scent of herbs and human skin. A child laughs, splashing nearby. Adults scrub with rough cloths or sand, careful to avoid drafts. Dogs move quietly along the edges, leaving traces of fur and mud. The room feels heavy, warm, and alive, a mixture of grossness and quiet rhythm. Despite the risks, people returned. The desire to wash, to feel warmth, to remove the day's dirt outweighed fears, even if illness lingered in rumors. A bathhouse remained a place of comfort and social life. Water, mud, soap, herbs, and steam became the constant companions of daily existence. The grossness, the mess, and the smells were all part of life's quiet, repetitive rhythm. Medieval baths were never purely clean or safe. Yet in their warmth, their steam, and their rituals, there was a form of calm. People adapted, balanced hygiene with fear, and continued to wash as best they could. Even in muddy, crowded, herbal-scented water, there was comfort, community, and gentle rhythm. The baths remind us that life, even when gross, can be slow, careful, and quietly human. Section 8. Scents, Smells, and the Aromas of Medieval Baths. The smell of a medieval bath was unforgettable, though not always pleasant. It was a mixture of human sweat, smoke from cooking fires, wet wood, and animals nearby. Herbs were added to mask odors, but they could only do so much. Every bathhouse, riverbank, or pond had its own unique scent, heavy and lingering. Smoke from nearby kitchens drifted in, mixing with steam and damp air. Bread baking, meat roasting, and fires for warmth all added layers to the aroma. Clothing, soaked from work or travel, carried its own smell, grime, sweat, and smoke combined. Even freshly scrubbed skin had the faint odor of ash or coarse soap. It was a world of strong, overlapping scents that modern noses might find shocking. Herbs played an important role in managing the smells. Lavender, rosemary, chamomile, and sage were often boiled in pots, releasing fragrant steam. Leaves might be floated in tubs or rubbed directly onto skin. The scents were calming, masking some of the harsher odors. Yet they never completely erased the underlying earthiness and sweat. Soap itself had a distinctive scent. Coarse, smoky, or fatty, it could sting the nose and skin at the same time. Some soaps were mixed with lye, leaving a sharp, bitter smell. When combined with mud, river silt, or animal oils, the odor became dense and almost tangible. Even after rinsing, remnants clung to skin, hair, and clothes. Animals added their own aromas. Dogs shaking wet fur scattered droplets and carried mud into bathhouses or rivers. Horses, cows, and pigs stirred banks and streams, leaving a mix of manure and damp earth. Even small birds contributed feathers and droppings, adding to the sensory experience. People learned to tolerate these smells, considering them part of daily life. Children, too, influenced the aromas. Their laughter and play sent splashes into the water, mixing soil and straw with bubbles. Little hands smeared mud on faces or in tubs. The smell of wet children, playful and earthy, mingled with herbs and soap. Parents often accepted this mess, knowing it was unavoidable in a busy household or riverbank. The water itself had a smell. Rivers and ponds carried algae, decaying plants, and sometimes animal waste. The stagnant water of shallow areas created a sweet, musty scent. Even moving rivers could carry the odor of upstream farms, animals, or towns. Bathing in this water meant immersing oneself in the natural, sometimes gross, world. Bathhouse air was thick with multiple scents. Steam rose, holding the aroma of dozens of bodies, herbs, and coarse soap. Wood and stone absorbed water and smells, releasing them slowly over time. Every step on wet floors pressed droplets and odors back into the air. It was a heavy, dense environment, yet strangely calming in its consistency. Food and drink also contributed to the scents. Bread, cheese, wine, and roasted meat were sometimes served inside bathhouses. Crumbs fell into tubs, grease floated on the water, and aromas mixed with the existing layers of human and animal scents. Even the act of eating while bathing added a unique complexity to the olfactory experience. People became accustomed to this strange mixture, finding comfort in familiarity. Weather affected the smells as well. On hot days, rivers and ponds released earthy, musty aromas more strongly. Warm water accelerated the scent of herbs, soap, and skin. In winter, indoor bathhouses carried the smoky aroma of fires, mingling with the wet, heavy scent of damp floors and bodies. Even cold mornings could not completely suppress these smells, but the warmth of water provided comfort. Some smells were considered beneficial. Herbal steam was believed to cleanse the mind and body, driving away bad airs. Vinegar or sour milk added tangy notes, thought to protect against illness. Despite their sharpness, these scents gave bathers a sense of control over their environment. Even gross odors were framed as part of the healthful ritual. Bathing rituals influenced how smells were experienced. People might wash in a specific order, allowing steam and scent to rise from different parts of the body. Children played, dogs shook, and adults scrubbed, creating shifting layers of aroma. Each movement stirred the air, making the room, river, or pond a constantly changing sensory space. The smell was both unpleasant and soothing, grounding people in the rhythm of daily life. The grossness of medieval bathing smells reminds us of the difference between then and now. There were no deodorants, no modern perfumes, and no running water to flush away odors. Yet people adapted, finding comfort in herbal scents, warm water, and the familiarity of shared smells. The layers of aroma, sweat, mud, herbs, soap, smoke, and animals became part of life's quiet rhythm. Even the grossest odors were absorbed into daily routines, accepted with calm and patience. Imagine standing in a bathhouse, riverbank, or pond. Steam rises slowly, carrying herbs and smoke. A child splashes nearby, sending mud into the water. A dog shakes off water, spraying droplets into the air. The smell is dense, heavy, earthy, herbal, and human, yet strangely comforting. It is a rhythm, a world of layers, both gross and gentle, calming in its repetition. Even today, imagining these smells can bring a sense of slow, grounded awareness. People adapted to them, accepted them, and continued bathing in spite of discomfort. The aromas were part of the environment, part of life, part of the rhythm of medieval existence. Grossness, smell, and warmth combined, creating a soft, human, and quietly soothing experience. In this way, the medieval bath was never just about cleanliness. It was about life, rhythm, and being fully present in a messy, aromatic world. Section 9. Tools, utensils, and odd implements of medieval bathing. Medieval bathing was not simple, and it required a variety of tools and implements. Unlike today, there were no soft sponges or modern brushes. People relied on whatever was available, practical, and sometimes strange by modern standards. Each household had a set of items for washing, scrubbing, and rinsing the body. These tools shaped the rhythm, comfort, and sometimes the mess of bathing. Cloths were the most common implement. Rough linen or woolen rags were soaked in water and rubbed across the skin. The texture was coarse, removing dirt, sweat, and oils. For children, these cloths could be playful, used to splash or smear mud as much as to clean. Adults applied them slowly, methodically, scrubbing each arm, leg, and torso. Wooden brushes were another tool. They were made from twigs or stiff bristles, tied together to form a handle. People used them to scrub the back, arms, and feet. The bristles scratched at grime, sometimes painfully but effectively. Calluses and thick skin on feet were reduced through repeated rubbing. Pumice stones were prized for rough work. They were small, porous rocks rubbed over hands, feet, and elbows. The stone scraped away dead skin, leaving a slightly smoother surface. It was harsh, sometimes leaving redness, but considered necessary for hygiene. Wealthier households might have multiple stones for different family members. Soap, as in previous sections, was essential but limited. Bars were coarse and often mixed with lye, fat, or herbs. They left a smoky, bitter smell on skin and hair. Some bathers mixed soap with sand, creating a gritty paste for deeper cleaning. Soap was expensive for poorer households, so they improvised with ashes, clay, or fermented liquids. Buckets and basins were indispensable. Water had to be carried from wells, rivers, or cisterns. Buckets were wooden or clay, sometimes reinforced with metal bands. Families poured water over themselves or into large tubs for communal washing. Even in bathhouses, smaller basins allowed for individual rinsing or private washing. Scraping tools were used for stubborn grime. Flat pieces of wood, leather, or bone were pressed against the skin to remove dirt. Some were simple paddles, others shaped to fit elbows or knees. They could be painful, especially when removing thick layers of mud or sweat. Yet the practice was valued as a way to maintain appearance and health. Hair combs were widely used, even though lice were nearly impossible to remove. Wooden combs with wide teeth untangled hair, while fine-toothed combs helped pick out small insects. The process was slow and meticulous, requiring patience and care. Children often sat for long periods while parents or older siblings carefully combed their hair. Even with this effort, itching and discomfort were part of daily life. Sponges, where available, were used sparingly. Natural sea sponges were imported in wealthier regions. They were soft and absorbent, ideal for gentle scrubbing. However, they could carry bacteria and were rarely cleaned thoroughly. They were a luxury item, mostly used by nobles or well-off townspeople. Rags were cloths often doubled as towels. There were few proper drying methods. People wrung out water, rubbed themselves with damp linen, or let the sun dry their skin. Bathhouses sometimes had benches where people sat to air dry, hair dripping into tubs or onto floors. The air carried a mixture of water, soap, and human scent, thick and heavy. Pots and kettles were part of the bathing routine as well. Water had to be heated over fires and poured carefully into tubs or basins. Some used ladles to scoop hot water, mixing it with cooler water to reach a comfortable temperature. The smell of burning wood, steam, and soap mingled in the air. Even preparing water was a slow, deliberate, and sometimes messy process. Herbs were tools as much as they were aromatic. Lavender, rosemary, sage, and chamomile were boiled, crushed, or placed in cloth bags. They were rubbed on the body, floated in water, or sprinkled on floors to mask odors. The scents were calming, but they also indicated status. Herbs were often more accessible to wealthier households. Poorer families used leaves, twigs, or wild flowers, softer but less fragrant. Even unconventional tools existed. Eggshells were crushed and rubbed as gentle scrubs. Bread soaked in wine could clean and soften the face. Nettles, though stinging, were rubbed over the skin to improve circulation. People experimented with materials around them, finding both practical and unusual ways to stay clean. Cleaning garments was part of the routine. Scrubbing boards, stones, and wooden paddles were used to wash clothes in rivers or tubs. Ash or sand sometimes replaced soap, and garments were beaten against stones. This process left water muddy and sometimes dangerous, Yet it was necessary to maintain clothing. Even the act of bathing clothes contributed to the overall mess and rhythm of washing. Children learned to use these tools gradually. Parents guided small hands in scrubbing, combing, and rinsing. They learned which herbs softened the skin, which scrubs were effective, and which implements were too harsh. Games, splashes, and accidents mixed with these lessons, creating a rich sensory experience. The mess and the tools were intertwined, a constant part of growing up in medieval life. Imagine standing in a bathhouse surrounded by tubs, buckets, brushes, and pumice stones. Steam rises, carrying the smell of herbs and soap. A child drops a brush, sending water and grime splashing. A dog shakes itself nearby, spraying droplets across the wooden floor. Adults scrub carefully, hands red from rough cloth and pumice, water dripping onto benches. The room is alive with tools, odors, and gentle rhythm, gross and soothing all at once. The tools of medieval bathing were never luxurious by modern standards, yet they fulfilled a critical role, guiding people through messy, imperfect routines. They shaped habits, preserved health, and even taught patience. Every implement, from coarse cloths to herbal bags, contributed to life's rhythm. Even in the mess, there was calm, order, and a quiet, slow human heartbeat. Section 10: Seasonal Bathing and Weather Challenges in Medieval Times. Bathing in the Middle Ages was deeply influenced by the seasons. Water availability, temperature, and weather dictated when and how people could wash. Summer allowed for longer, more playful bathing in rivers, ponds, or outdoor tubs. Winter required careful planning, heated water, and sometimes smaller, quicker routines. The rhythm of the year shaped the habits, smells, and even the grossness of medieval hygiene. In spring, rivers and ponds were often full from melted snow and rainfall. The water was cold at first, but gradually warmed under the sun. Algae and plant debris floated, creating a green, soft layer on the surface. People adjusted to these conditions, stepping slowly, testing the temperature with hands or feet. Children, however, often ignored caution, splashing and laughing through muddy water. Spring bathing included the renewal of herbs and flowers. Lavender, rosemary, sage, and chamomile became abundant in fields. Leaves and petals were collected and floated in tubs or rubbed on skin. Their scents combined with mud, sweat, and river water, creating a layered aroma. Even gross smells were softened, replaced by faintly sweet, herbal notes. Summer brought warmth, but also challenges. Rivers were low, sometimes stagnant, causing water to become murky. Bathing outdoors could be messy, with mud clinging to feet and ankles. Large gatherings in town ponds or bathhouses increased the density of dirt, oil, and skin flakes. Children and animals continued to play in water, adding to the mess. Heat also accelerated the smell of the water. Sweat, soap, mud, and herbs mingled more strongly in warm air. Even so, summer allowed for longer washing times, as the sun and warmth reduced discomfort. People lingered, scrubbing, rinsing, and sometimes simply resting in the water. The combination of warmth and gentle chaos created a strange comfort amid the mess. Autumn brought cooler air and shorter days. Rivers and ponds became cold, making long baths uncomfortable. Leaves fell into the water, creating slippery surfaces and subtle decay smells. Mud was thicker, mixed with fallen foliage and farm runoff. People bathed quickly, focusing on essential cleaning rather than play or leisure. Herbs for scent and cleansing were still gathered in autumn. Dry leaves, petals, and twigs were boiled or crushed. The aromas were subtler, mixing with damp earth and fading sunlight. Even in murky water, people attempted gentle washing, using what was available to maintain some hygiene. Animals remained a presence, splashing and stirring up debris as children followed them into shallow water. Winter created the most difficult conditions. Cold water made outdoor bathing nearly impossible for most. Snow and ice covered riverbanks, and ponds were frozen in some regions. Indoor bathhouses became essential for anyone seeking warmth and cleaning. Families heated water over fires, often in large cauldrons, pouring it carefully into wooden tubs. Heating water was labor-intensive. Fuel, wood or coal, was gathered and maintained throughout the day. People had to balance temperature, timing, and comfort. Buckets and ladles were used to mix hot and cold water, achieving a tolerable heat. The steam filled rooms quickly, carrying the smell of smoke, herbs, and wet wood. Winter also influenced smells. Smoke from fires mixed with damp wood, wet floors, and human bodies. Herbs became more precious, added in small amounts to mask odors. Even though the water was cleaner than in rivers or ponds, the scent of the room was heavy and persistent. People adapted, learning to accept the dense aromas as part of seasonal hygiene. Clothing and towels were affected by the seasons. In summer, garments could dry quickly in the sun. In winter, they often remained damp, carrying faint odors of smoke, water, and sweat. People layered clothing to conserve warmth, even if it trapped smells close to the skin. Towels were scarce and drying was slow, adding to the overall sensory experience. Seasonal illness influenced bathing practices. During winter, cold drafts were avoided, as people feared chills and respiratory illness. Summer brought concerns about parasites and stagnant water. Spring and autumn required caution due to sudden temperature shifts. Despite these risks, bathing was essential, a blend of necessity, comfort, and ritual. Animals were part of the seasonal story. Dogs, cats, and livestock adapted to weather, often entering the water with people. Mud, snow, leaves, and animal waste added to the challenge of washing effectively. Children continued to play, splashing and laughing, regardless of temperature or season. These interactions reinforced the rhythm of life, making bathing a constant, albeit messy part of daily routine. Households developed strategies for seasonal challenges. Large tubs were used in winter to conserve hot water. Buckets were carried short distances to avoid heat loss. Baths were scheduled carefully, sometimes early in the day to maximize warmth from the sun or fires. Tools, herbs, and soap were managed more cautiously, ensuring nothing was wasted during harsher months. Even with all these challenges, bathing offered comfort. Warm water soothed muscles, steam lifted tension, and herbs provided a faintly sweet scent. The chaos of children, animals, mud, and debris was balanced by slow, deliberate washing. People adapted to the seasons, creating a rhythm of hygiene, health, and daily life. Grossness and mess were unavoidable, yet there was calm in the routine, even in the coldest or hottest months. Imagine standing by a winter bathhouse. Steam rises from hot tubs, carrying the scent of smoke and herbs. A dog shakes off water nearby, sending droplets across the floor. Children tiptoe in and out, laughter soft in the steam. The smell is dense, earthy, smoky, and herbal. Despite cold outside, the room is warm, the rhythm slow, and the mess strangely comforting. Seasonal bathing reminds us that medieval life was deeply connected to nature. Temperature, weather, and environment shaped routines, smells, and even grossness. People learned to adapt, finding warmth, calm, and gentle rhythm in spite of mud, sweat, and animal mess. Even in difficult conditions, bathing remained a slow, human, and soothing practice. Life continued, messy and aromatic, yet quietly calm and strangely comforting. Section 11. Medieval Bathhouse Architecture and Construction. Medieval bathhouses were more than simple rooms with tubs. They were carefully designed to accommodate people, water, animals, and the rhythm of daily life. Materials, layout, and heating were all considered, though by modern standards, hygiene was secondary to practicality. Every aspect of construction shaped how people bathed, how smells lingered, and how the grossness of daily life was managed. Most bathhouses were made from stone, wood, or a combination of both. Stone walls retained heat, providing a stable, warm environment. Wooden beams and floors were used for support, often absorbing water and releasing damp, earthy odors over time. The construction allowed people to move safely, though floors remained slippery from water, mud, and debris. Roofs varied depending on location and wealth. Simple villages had thatched or wooden roofs, letting in occasional drafts or rain. Wealthier towns had tiled or stone roofs, keeping warmth inside. Steam condensed on beams and dripped slowly, creating soft, persistent moisture. People learned to step carefully, avoiding drips, puddles, and uneven surfaces. Bathhouses were usually divided into sections. There might be a changing area, a washing area, and sometimes a relaxation space. Tubs were placed along walls or in central areas, depending on size and number of bathers. Children often occupied corners, splashing and playing, while adults moved more deliberately. Even the layout contributed to the rhythm of the bath, guiding movement through water, steam, and smell. Heating was essential, especially in winter. Large fireplaces or wood stoves were common, warming water and the air. Stone walls retained heat, making the bathhouse a refuge from cold winds. Buckets of hot water were carried carefully, poured into tubs, or mixed with cooler water for comfort. The warmth created steam that carried the scents of herbs, soap, and human activity, thick and soothing. Some bathhouses had drainage systems. Channels of stone or clay directed wastewater into rivers or cesspits. These channels often became clogged with hair, soap residue, and debris from clothing or mud. The water moved slowly, creating a faint, earthy odor. Even so, drainage reduced the amount of standing water, which could otherwise harbor disease or pests. Windows and ventilation played a subtle role. Small openings allowed light to enter and helped steam escape. During hot summer days, they cooled the room slightly, preventing excessive humidity. Birds sometimes perched on the ledges, leaving feathers or droppings behind. The combination of ventilation and openings created a dynamic, slightly messy environment. Flooring was rarely smooth. Stone slabs, wooden planks, or compacted earth made up most surfaces. Slips and falls were common, especially with children or animals running about. Water pooled in uneven areas, mixing with mud, soap residue, and small debris. The result was a tactile, messy, and organic environment, part of the rhythm of bathing. Benches and seating areas were included in most bathhouses. People sat to wash slowly, to rest between tubs, or to allow clothes to dry. Children perched on low benches, splashing, while adults leaned against stone walls, rubbing arms and legs. Animals sometimes found resting spots, adding their own mess to floors or benches. Even the furniture contributed to the sensory complexity of bathing spaces. Decorations were minimal in most public bathhouses. Painted walls, simple carvings, or herbs hung from beams were occasional touches. Wealthier bathhouses had tiled floors or mosaic decorations, though these were rare. The focus was function, warmth, and containment of water, not aesthetic perfection. Even in sparse rooms, the mixture of smells, textures, and sounds created a living, breathing environment. Water storage was critical. Tubs had to be filled carefully, often from wells, rivers, or heated cauldrons. Large ceramic or wooden containers held water for multiple users. Buckets and ladles allowed people to pour water over themselves or rinse after scrubbing. The movement of water, sloshing in tubs or splashing on floors, created the familiar, gentle chaos of medieval bathing. Bathhouses were social spaces. People gathered to wash, to talk, or to observe the rhythm of daily life. Children learned by watching older family members, while adults shared stories and advice. Animals followed owners or wandered corners, adding unpredictability and mess. Even the architecture, from tubs to benches to heating systems, facilitated this blend of hygiene, social life, and routine. In some regions, bathhouses were attached to inns or monasteries. Travelers could use the facilities, sharing water and space with locals. The movement of strangers, animals, and children all contributed to the constantly shifting sensory environment. Smells, steam, and temperature changes flowed through rooms, creating a rhythm both gross and oddly calming. People adapted, learning to navigate floors, benches, and tubs with care. Imagine standing quietly in a medieval bathhouse. Stone walls absorb steam and warmth. Wooden beams drip from condensation, faintly earthy. Children laugh in a corner, splashing water that mixes with soap and mud. Dogs shake near benches, sending droplets across the floor. Herbs simmer in pots, masking heavier odors with a faint, herbal sweetness. The architecture guided all of this activity. Rooms were constructed for warmth, movement, and interaction. Water flowed, debris accumulated, and smells mingled in complex layers. Every plank, stone, and beam shaped the rhythm of bathing, both practical and sensory. Even the grossest moments, the mud, hair, animal mess, or spilled water, were framed by structure, order, and slow human rhythm. Medieval bathhouses were not clean by modern standards, yet they were carefully designed, allowing life to unfold amidst water, animals, children, and heat. The mixture of grossness and function created a space that was messy, alive, and quietly soothing. Every detail, from drainage channels to tubs, benches, and beams, contributed to the rhythm of daily life. Even in mess, there was calm, order, and a slow human heartbeat. Section 12. Medieval Bathing Rituals and Superstitions. Bathing in medieval times was more than just washing the body. It was a ritual, a daily or weekly practice intertwined with beliefs, superstitions, and health advice. People thought the water itself could carry danger or blessing. This belief shaped not only when and how they bathed, but also the smells, tools, and grossness that accompanied the process. Even the slow, messy routine of bathing was guided by careful thought and caution. Some believed that bathing at the wrong time could invite illness. Doctors advised against washing during certain hours or under certain weather conditions. Cold mornings or sudden drafts were especially feared. People adapted by creating schedules, often bathing in the warmest part of the day or in heated rooms. The timing became a ritual, a slow, deliberate approach to cleanliness and safety. Superstitions also governed the use of water. Some thought that water collected from rivers at sunrise had special cleansing powers. Others believed that water from specific wells or springs could prevent skin diseases or strengthen the body. Even muddy river water was sometimes chosen for its purifying qualities, despite obvious risks. These beliefs added a layer of meaning to every wash, connecting hygiene with luck, protection, and ritual. Bathing involved specific sequences of actions. People often washed feet and hands first, working slowly toward the face and hair. Children learned by observing adults, practicing scrubbing, rinsing, and drying in the prescribed order. Tools such as cloths, brushes, pumice stones, and herbal bags were used deliberately in this sequence. Even minor deviations were noticed, as correct order was thought to prevent disease or bad luck. Herbs played a ritual role. Lavender, rosemary, chamomile, and sage were used not only to mask odors, but to protect the body and spirit. People rubbed leaves on the skin or placed bundles in tubs, believing the scents warded off evil or miasmas. In some regions, certain herbs were reserved for specific times or ages, creating a careful pattern to each bath. Even gross smells, like mud and human oil, were softened by these herbal rituals. Religious beliefs shaped bathing as well. Monks and nuns often bathed as part of preparation for prayer, seeing cleanliness as linked to purity of soul. Pilgrims carried water or herbs for ritual washing during travel. Even common people incorporated prayer or quiet reflection while bathing, blending physical and spiritual care. The rhythm of washing became a gentle meditation amidst mess, steam, and scent. Some superstitions focused on the body itself. It was believed that scrubbing too hard could remove protective oils, leaving the body vulnerable. Scraping, rough brushing, or excessive washing were sometimes avoided to maintain balance of humors. Conversely, some areas, like feet or hands, were scrubbed vigorously to prevent disease from entering the body. This careful approach added a layer of tension and planning to every bath. Children learned rituals slowly. Parents or older siblings instructed them in the correct use of soap, brushes, and water. Mistakes were corrected gently, creating a calm, educational atmosphere. Even the gross aspects, mud, hair, animal splashes, were woven into this learning process. Bathing became both practical and ceremonial, a slow human rhythm repeated over years. Bathhouses themselves supported rituals. Tubs were arranged for efficiency and privacy, benches for rest and drying. Hot water was heated in specific ways, sometimes mixed with herbal infusions. Steam rose evenly, carrying scents of herbs and human bodies. Every detail, from tubs to tools to floor layout, contributed to the ritual experience. There were seasonal superstitions as well. Spring water was believed to heal certain ailments, while summer bathing might prevent fevers. Winter baths were thought to strengthen the body if carefully timed with heat and herbs. Autumn washing could protect against chills and prepare the body for colder months. These beliefs influenced the frequency, duration, and methods of bathing throughout the year. Animals were part of ritual too. Dogs or cats sometimes followed bathers, their presence accepted and integrated into the routine. The splashes, fur, and occasional mess became normal parts of the ceremonial experience. Even children's play contributed, a predictable, rhythmic chaos that shaped the space. Every sound, smell, and movement became part of the slow, calming ritual of washing. Certain implements held symbolic importance. Pumice stones removed not only dirt, but also bad humors. Cloths were sometimes dedicated to specific family members or rituals. Herbal bundles could be rotated or placed in certain positions in the tub, enhancing perceived protective effects. Even coarse soap, scrubbed slowly, was part of a carefully constructed practice, merging hygiene, superstition, and calm. Even though bathing involved gross smells, mud and water shared among many, rituals created a sense of control. People moved deliberately, followed sequences, and used specific tools in the correct order. Steam, herbal scents, and warmth provided comfort amid the mess. The grossness became background to a steady rhythm, soothing and familiar. Even minor splashes, hair clumps, and animal droppings were accepted as part of the ritual environment. Imagine a quiet medieval bathhouse. Steam rises, carrying herbs and smoke. Children play at one corner, splashing gently. Adults scrub slowly, following rituals learned over years. Dogs shake, sending water across stone and wood floors. The smells are dense, earthy, herbal, human, yet strangely calming in repetition. Rituals and superstitions ensured that bathing was never hasty. Even grossness and mess were framed within a slow, deliberate human rhythm. People adapted to smells, tools, animals, and water, finding calm in repeated patterns. The combination of ritual, superstition, and hygiene created a space both messy and soothing. Medieval baths were not just cleaning, they were slow, careful, and quietly human. Section 13. Hygiene, Hair and Skincare in Medieval Baths. Hygiene in medieval times was a careful balance of necessity, ritual, and practicality. People washed not just to be clean, but to protect their health and comfort. Bathing addressed dirt, sweat, and oil, while also helping to prevent lice, fleas, and skin irritations. The methods were slow, deliberate, and sometimes messy, with children and animals adding to the rhythm of daily life. Skincare began with simple scrubbing. Rough cloths, brushes, or pumice stones were used to remove dead skin and dirt. Water could be warm or cold, depending on the season and availability. Soap, often coarse and strong, was rubbed in slowly, sometimes mixed with herbs for scent. Even though smells and mud persisted, people felt refreshed, softened, and protected after washing. Pumice stones were especially useful for thickened skin. They were rubbed across feet, elbows, and knees, scraping away rough layers. The texture could sting, but it was considered necessary for health and comfort. Children learned to use stones carefully, while adults applied them with methodical care. Even gross residue from dirt and sweat was slowly removed, leaving skin slightly smoother and more flexible. Soap played a central role in hygiene. Made from lye and animal fat, it was harsh and smoky. Some soaps were mixed with herbs like rosemary, sage, or lavender, softening their smell. Soap was rubbed over every part of the body, from hands to feet, face to back. Even after rinsing, a faint scent lingered, blending with the earthy aroma of water and steam. Hair care was a complex part of bathing. Combs, brushes, and sometimes special sticks were used to untangle strands. Children often had hair carefully combed by adults, removing knots and occasionally picking out lice. The smell of wet hair mixed with smoke, herbs, and soap, creating a dense, earthy aroma. Even the simplest hair care could take a long time, particularly for long or thick hair. Some people used herbal rinses for hair. Chamomile, rosemary, and sage were boiled in water and poured over heads. These rinses softened hair and added a faint fragrance, masking natural oils and sweat. The process was slow, and water often ran across floors, adding to the gentle chaos of bathhouses. Despite gross smells and dripping water, hair care was considered an essential routine. Nails were cleaned carefully as part of hygiene. Dirt often collected beneath fingernails and toenails from work or play. Small sticks, knives, or bone tools were used to scrape out debris. Children learned patience, while adults focused on thorough cleaning, sometimes sharing techniques across family members. Even tiny details, like nails, contributed to the overall rhythm of the bath. Face care had its own methods: soft cloths, water, and sometimes bread or fermented liquids were used to remove dirt. Rubbing was gentle to avoid irritation, yet thorough enough to remove grime from work or outdoor activity. Children often helped with face washing, splashing, and lathing, adding movement and water to the routine. The combination of gross residue and careful cleaning shaped the tactile sensory experience of bathing. Bathing was often communal, especially in rivers or ponds. Families, neighbors, and sometimes strangers shared water. This created both mess and comfort as people adapted to each other's presence. Animals, too, might be present, adding mud, hair, or splashes. Even gross elements became predictable, forming a rhythm that made bathing calm and familiar. Moisturizing was minimal, but sometimes included. Herbal oils, animal fats, or simple ointments were applied to skin after washing. They softened rough patches, reduced cracks in cold weather, and left a faint scent of herbs or smoke. Even the grossest skin, worn by dirt, sweat, and mud, could feel slightly smoother after this treatment. These practices were slower and more deliberate than modern bathing, emphasizing care over speed. Bathing often concluded with a gentle drying ritual. Cloths, linen rags, or even old garments were used to absorb water. In winter, drying was slow, and people moved carefully near fires to avoid chills. Children played quietly, splashing minimal amounts of water, while adults rubbed skin and hair methodically. The slow conclusion allowed the senses to settle. The warmth, to be absorbed, and the rhythmic grossness of water, mud, and steam to fade into calm. Even minor injuries or irritations were treated during bathing. Scrapes, cuts, or rashes were washed carefully, sometimes with herbal infusions. Mud, grime, and water made this messy, yet the slow attention brought comfort and relief. Children watched adults, learning gentle methods and techniques for future baths. Even gross moments of blood, dirt, or soap residue became part of a calm, controlled process. Imagine standing in a medieval bathhouse. Steam rises, carrying herbs and smoky soap scents. A child splashes gently, sending droplets onto stone floors. Adults scrub slowly, pumice stones in hand, hair being combed carefully. The smell is dense, earthy, herbal, human, yet strangely soothing in repetition. Hygiene, hair care, and skin treatment were never rushed. Even amidst gross smells, mud, and animal presence, the rhythm was slow and deliberate. People learned patience, observed rituals, and embraced the sensory environment. Bathing was messy, aromatic, and full of small, careful movements. Yet through it all, it remained calm, human, and quietly comforting. Section 14: Diseases, Parasites, and the Unpleasant Side of Medieval Bathing. Bathing in medieval times was often necessary, but it carried its own risks. Rivers, ponds, and public bathhouses could harbor germs, parasites, and other unseen hazards. People were aware of some dangers, though their understanding was limited by the knowledge of the time. Even gross and unpleasant aspects of bathing became part of daily life, quietly accepted and woven into routine. Despite risks, people continued to bathe for comfort, hygiene, and ritual. Parasites were a common concern. Lice, fleas, and tiny insects infested hair and clothing. Children often carried small creatures from outdoor play or crowded spaces. Adults combed, picked, or washed repeatedly, attempting to remove them. Even with careful attention, parasites were persistent, creating a subtle, ongoing challenge. Waterborne illnesses were another hidden danger. Rivers or ponds sometimes contained decaying plants, animal waste, or stagnant areas. Swimmers or bathers could contract stomach or skin infections. Soap and herbs helped slightly, but prevention was mostly a matter of caution and observation. Even gross water conditions were tolerated because bathing was essential. Bathhouses themselves could become breeding grounds for germs. Shared tubs, benches, and floors carried traces of previous visitors. Hair, skin flakes, and residue from soaps and mud accumulated over time. Children and animals added to the mixture, creating layers of human and natural matter. Despite the unpleasantness, people moved carefully through routines, accepting the environment. Skin irritations were common. Coarse scrubbing, rough cloths, or pumice stones could create small cuts or redness. Soap, often harsh, sometimes stung or dried the skin. People learned to balance cleaning with gentle care, adjusting pressure and duration. Even gross, uncomfortable reactions became part of the slow rhythm of hygiene. Parasitic infections influenced clothing care. Garments were washed in rivers, basins, or tubs, often with ash or sand. Fleas and lice could hide in seams, folds, and collars. Children's clothing required careful attention, combing, scrubbing, or sometimes beating to remove pests. Even with these efforts, some parasites survived, coexisting with humans in a messy but accepted reality. Bathing also carried minor injuries. Slippery floors, splashing water, or splintered wood caused scrapes and bruises. Children playing, animals moving nearby, and uneven surfaces all contributed to accidents. These incidents added to the sensory environment, combining discomfort with the calm rhythm of water, tools, and steam. Even gross injuries, blood, or debris were handled slowly and methodically. Integrated into the routine, diseases influenced social behavior around bathing. People avoided others when visibly ill, but subtle infections often went unnoticed. Rivers and ponds were shared, meaning germs traveled easily. Bathhouse rituals helped reduce risk slightly, through herbal use, heated water, or specific washing sequences. Despite the risk of illness, communal bathing remained a vital practice. Animals played a role in spreading parasites and germs. Dogs and cats often followed people into tubs or bathhouses. Droplets of water carried fur, mud, and tiny insects. Children's play mixed further, creating a dense, sensory experience. Even with gross conditions, people adapted, learning careful movement, slow routines, and tolerance. Bathing also revealed natural body processes. Skin oils, sweat, and secretions mingled with water, herbs, and dirt. Hair clumped or released small debris. Pumice and cloth scrubbed away layers. Yet traces always remained. Even gross residues were accepted as part of the slow, calming rhythm of cleansing. Rituals sometimes included protective measures. Herbs like rosemary, sage, and chamomile were used to repel insects. Fumes from burning substances might be introduced, adding scent and reducing pests. Water mixing, pouring techniques, and timing were also believed to reduce exposure to invisible dangers. Even in messy, gross environments, people sought comfort and safety through these practices. Children learned patience and caution. Watching adults, they understood which areas of the body required careful scrubbing. They learned to avoid slipping, minimize splashes, and manage tools effectively. Even the gross and unpleasant side of bathing became a slow lesson in rhythm and awareness. Animals, mud, and water were predictable participants in this education. Bathing had mental and emotional effects despite its gross aspects. Warm water, steam, and the repeated sequence of washing created calm. Children played gently, adults scrubbed deliberately, and herbs softened smells. Even parasites, debris, and residual grime became part of a soothing sensory pattern. The grossness was framed within careful routines, rhythm, and human adaptation. Imagine a medieval bathhouse or riverbank. Steam rises from warm water, carrying herbal scents. Children splash slowly, puddles form under benches. Animals move quietly, sometimes shaking water across floors. Hair, skin, and mud float gently in tubs. The environment is gross, messy, yet calm, rhythmic, and oddly comforting. Despite diseases, parasites, and unpleasant smells, people continued bathing. They adapted tools, rituals, and routines to maintain hygiene. Even grossness became part of a steady, slow rhythm of life. Bathing in medieval times was messy, aromatic, and full of challenges, yet quietly human and calming. Gross, unpleasant, and persistent, it was still essential, soothing, and part of daily rhythm. Section 15. the last moments and leaving the bath. The final moments of medieval bathing were slow, deliberate, and calm. After scrubbing, rinsing, and applying herbs, people prepared to leave the water. Even the act of exiting a tub or river required attention to safety, warmth, and comfort. Children, adults, and even animals followed routines learned over years, each movement contributing to a quiet rhythm. Water was drained carefully when possible. Tubs were emptied into channels, basins, or rivers. In larger bathhouses, channels allowed water to flow away from floors, carrying traces of soap, mud, and hair. Even this drainage created sounds, slosh, trickle, and occasional splash, that were part of the sensory environment. The gross residue of the day's washing remained in small amounts, slowly carried away with the water. People dried themselves gently. Linen rags or cloths were rubbed across skin, absorbing moisture. Children often giggled, shaking water from hair or hands, splashing lightly. Adults moved slowly, careful to avoid drafts, slips, or sudden cold. Even drying was ritualized, part of the calming conclusion to a long bath. Clothing was replaced slowly. Garments were layered to conserve warmth, sometimes damp from washing or air drying. Fabrics carried faint scents of herbs, soap, smoke, or residual water. Children learned patience while adults dressed, ensuring comfort and minimizing exposure to cold. Animals, too, returned to their spaces, sometimes brushing against people and adding small traces of mud or fur. Hair care concluded last. Combs and brushes were used gently to remove tangles and smooth strands. Herbal rinses were sometimes applied, leaving a subtle scent. Children observed, learning the careful handling of hair, and occasionally helped one another. Even grossness from residual lice, small debris, or water runoff became minor, accepted details in this slow routine. Tools were cleaned and stored. Cloths, brushes, pumice stones, and buckets were rinsed, set aside, and occasionally hung to dry. Wooden implements absorbed water, releasing faint smells of herbs and dampness over hours. Buckets retained traces of soap, mud, and hair, slowly evaporating throughout the day. Even cleaning tools was a quiet, methodical part of the bath, adding closure and calm. The air changed after bathing. Steam faded gradually, carrying aromas of herbs, smoke, water, and human presence. Stone walls, wooden beams, and floorboards released moisture slowly, mixing with residual scents. The room became quieter as children left. Animals returned to corners, and adults finished drying. Even gross smells were transformed into a soft, earthy background, soothing and familiar. Footprints remained on floors. Water, mud, and debris formed a delicate trail of the day's activity. Children sometimes splashed one last time before leaving, adding gentle chaos to the rhythm. Adults stepped carefully, following paths learned through experience. Even the mess left behind became part of the quiet, living memory of the bathhouse. People often paused before leaving completely. Hands were wrung, cloths folded, and hair checked. A glance around the room revealed tools, water, animals, and children's scattered playthings. The space felt alive and calm at once, a blend of grossness, warmth, and gentle rhythm. Each pause reinforced the slow, deliberate nature of medieval bathing. Bathing was also a sensory meditation. The mixture of smells, textures, sounds, and sights lingered in the mind. Children and adults alike experienced calm in the midst of mud, hair, water, and steam. Even gross moments, scraps of soap, dirt, or small splashes were reframed as part of the rhythm. The body, clean or partially cleaned, felt warmth and relaxation, ready to continue daily life. Rituals concluded naturally. Herbs were stored or scattered, tools returned, and water left to flow away. People reflected quietly, feeling the steady rhythm of movement, smell, and touch. Children learned patience and care, integrating lessons of hygiene, balance, and attention. Even the gross elements, residual mud, hair, or animal traces added texture to these final moments. Imagine stepping out of a medieval bathhouse. Steam fades, leaving warmth in the air. Herbs, soap, and smoke linger faintly on skin and clothing. Children walk slowly, their hair damp, clothes slightly messy. Animals move quietly, adding small traces of fur or mud. The environment feels alive, messy and yet calm, rhythmic and oddly soothing. Even after leaving, the bath leaves a lasting impression. Skin feels smoother, hair slightly softened, and the body warmer. The sensory environment, the mix of smells, textures, and sounds, remains faintly in memory. Even grossness, dirt, and residue are reframed as part of a deliberate, calming routine. Medieval bathing ends not with sudden cleanliness, but with a slow, human rhythm carried forward into daily life. Our journey through medieval bathing comes to a gentle close. We have explored water, tools, herbs, smells, and the rhythm of slow washing. We have observed children, animals, mud, hair, and steam, and the careful routines that shaped daily life. Even the gross and unpleasant aspects have been part of a soothing, deliberate rhythm. Take a slow breath. Feel the warmth, the calm, and the gentle movement of the day's activities fading. The sounds, smells, and textures drift softly away, leaving peace. Imagine the water, herbs, and warmth settling into quiet memory, like steam rising and disappearing. Your body is calm. Your mind is slow, and the rhythm of washing lingers softly. The grossness, mud, hair, and sweat are behind you, replaced by a sense of order and comfort. The medieval bathhouse, the rivers, the tubs, and the gentle routines rest quietly in memory. Now let sleep take over, slow and peaceful, carrying you through calm and warmth. Good night. May your dreams be soft, rhythmic, and comforting, like the quiet flow of medieval water.